Now let's talk about the 24-hour race in Nürburgring. Before we get into the race, I did want to point out you did try to watch it.
Yes, unfortunately, I was under the impression, and I think I got it mixed up with a different Nürburgring race. I think maybe it is the 12-hour race. I'm uncertain. I thought they would broadcast the whole race on YouTube. However, they only showed, only in quotes, so from specific teams, they live streamed their driver
Onboard?
view, their onboards, as well as there was a 24-hour stream of the pit lane, which is, I mean, you could have it on. I'm uncertain how much really it helps, you know? So I ended up not watching really any of it. We did watch highlights. We watched like start highlights, mid-race highlights, and then the end. I think the first thing that really stands out to me is, and I think this is maybe also something that you really realized today, is how long the Nürburgring is. Because I remember doing laps on it on Gran Turismo as well as on iRacing, and it's like, depending on the car, it's like a 7-minute lap because it's 25 kilometers, right?
Which is
including the Nordschleife.
Yeah, because it's the track and it's then the Nordschleife.
Yeah, it's not the full track.
Yes.
There's part of it where you then veer off. But and then what I thought was so insane is because how many cars?
Yes, because so we watched the start, like you said, and so they had
3 groups, right?
They had 3 groups. So they started with the first one, and then it was already 20 plus cars in it.
Which you could say those are the platinum drivers.
Yeah, so those are the fastest ones on track. They start first. So they have like their outlap, or I don't think they do a full outlap, but like they come and then they do a rolling start, off they go. And then just a couple moments later, they were like, okay, and here's the second group. I was like, the second group? Okay, I guess.
I didn't think the second group was as surprising.
No. Yeah, that was my like, oh, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because in Le Mans, we also have 3 groups technically, but it's 3 different vehicle types, of course. So then we had the second group roll out, and there are also 20 plus drivers. I was like, wow, that's a lot. And then suddenly they're like, okay, and then here is the third group. And it's also 20 plus cars.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely differences in cars, because in the third group, you also had a Volkswagen, you had
A
Minis.
Beetle,
you had a Beetle.
Awesome. You had a Hyundai.
Yeah, so you had a bunch of, I mean, there's different subcategories within
a Datsun,
the
I
group.
think.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, yeah.
So it was a nice variety of things too. But then it was like, so there's a third group coming, 20 plus drivers. And the first group hasn't even made it around the track yet, which is insane. And while we were watching the highlights, I was like, oh, wow, I don't think I've watched, like, I know that the Nürburgring and the Nordschleife is extremely large. And it's in my dream to one day drive on it, because you can.
Yeah.
But I would love to.
There's whole videos about people racing on there. Also, people doing stupid shit
like
on
in
there.
minivans, in Miatas, in
Literally
buses.
minivans and stuff like, in all types of cars.
Yes, it is my dream, and it's clear it's doable to drive on it. I would probably want to do at least 2 laps, just like one, just like kind of regular, because I've never driven it.
I mean, you would be on a sim first, so you know the track.
Okay, I
you
guess.
wouldn't want to go in blind, because it's
true.
too insane.
But then
in my opinion,
that's exactly what I was getting at. So when we were watching the highlights then of the actual like race, I was like, this track is insane.
It is, yeah.
And it's also, I mean, obviously we love Le Mans. Le Mans is like the pinnacle of endurance races.
Yeah.
Because also, I mean, in the Nürburgring, they don't have the hypercar. They don't have the LMP2 or the prototypes. They only have GT and quote unquote subclasses
I
there.
think it's touring cars and stuff like that. Yeah.
So they don't have the really, really fast ones, because I don't think it's doable.
Yeah, I mean, Niki Lauda had a terrible crash in F1 on the Nürburgring.
I mean, lots of people have died. Even audience people have died because of course crashing into.
Yeah, the Nürburgring is a different beast.
Yeah, there's like the one very famous area with the Flugplatz, where there's a part where you can take off if the car is too light at a certain position.
Yeah, because you're getting so much air underneath.
Exactly,
right?
so you can take off. And then there was also the guy from the GT Gran
Turismo movie?
Movie. The person who it's based on, he crashed literally at that spot.
And that's where the audience member died.
And that's where somebody had died. I mean, it's not the only time. But so it's an insane track. And I get that Le Mans is the pinnacle because of, also
24-hour race
history
and stuff like that. And it's been around much longer.
Exactly. But like seeing the 20, even just the bits and pieces that we saw of the 24-hour race at the Nürburgring, I was like, this is insane.
This almost seems more of the pinnacle.
Yes.
And of course, being German, a little bit biased and
Of
stuff
course,
like that. And
of
I will
course.
say also for the longest time, I did actually prefer Le Mans over the Nordschleife just because Le Mans is a much easier track.
Oh yeah, I mean
Much,
you have
much
lots and lots of
And
straights.
Yeah, I remember in Gran Turismo you can there's like these challenges you can do, and you can gold star a track. And like I know people do the Nordschleife, but I'm like, what a headache. This track, because like you have to do like sectors and you have to do them at a certain time frame, and then at the end you have to do the whole lap in a certain time, and like one mistake, and then because it's not like Monza or like Le Mans where it's a 3-minute lap, it's like 7 minutes, right? So you have to start that whole bitch over. And I've had many frustrating incidences on the Nordschleife, but I do respect it very much.
100%.
And
It's
I
definitely.
and I understand why, like Max Verstappen said recently when he did the Franz Hermann situation, it was on the Nürburgring with the Nordschleife, that he wants to participate in a 24-hour race there because it is the most, or one of the most difficult races
Because
you
it's
could
also
probably
like, so imagine you are driving for 24 hours, right?
Yes.
Which is already, what a feat. I mean, clearly one driver is not driving for 24 hours. They take turns and stuff like that. But it's such a feat for your team and the drivers to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But then on a track that is so difficult.
And there's no lights.
And then, yeah, exactly. There was parts where they showed nights. And I mean, there was the Mustang that was so cool. You had like lights, and then the horse, the Mustang was lit up too, which was really, really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all about some nice visuals.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's like literally there were parts of the track, if your car lights were not on, and there was one section where a car had crashed,
Audi,
and then the lights went off, and it was pitch dark.
Yeah, pitch black.
I mean, it was insane. And then you're driving at crazy speeds because you are racing for 24 hours, and then there's just you maybe there. I mean, maybe you're there with other people, of course, depending on how you're bunched up and stuff. But I'm like, this is bonkers.
It is, yes. I think one of the big things that also happened during the race is that it had to be red flagged because 2 hours into the race, there was a power outage in the pit lane. So that means no one had power. There was no communication about lap times and distances. And that also meant that the cars weren't able to be refueled.
Yes.
So they had to red flag the race. Then they restarted. And then I think the last thing we're just going to talk about it, because obviously you can't give a play-by-play, is what happened at the very end.
Yes.
So we had the Manthe Porsche with Kevin Estre, which, if you're unfamiliar with him, he actually just came second in Le Mans in the hypercar category.
Yes.
In a Porsche.
Also in a Porsche. He was devastated that he came in.
Yeah, we talked about him. And then the Manthe Porsche actually ended up winning the GT3 category of the Le Mans race. I think the 3rd year in a row or something like that. And
no, I think it was back to back.
But 2 years in a row. But the one of the drivers in it had won Le Mans like 5 or 6 times already.
6 or 7.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
More than that.
I mean, it's like crazy amounts.
Yeah,
yes.
crazy. And so the Porsche is really, really competitive. And so one of the things that is different to the Nürburgring race compared to the Le Mans race is they don't have the blue flag rules like they have at Le Mans.
Oh, I didn't realize that they don't have
I
those.
had read that in the comments. So, and then you had a situation where Kevin Estre in the Porsche was racing, and obviously the BMW and the Lamborghini that was the second and third place, they were behind him, and so they were racing through a portion through the track, and then there was an Aston Martin in front.
Yes.
And the Aston Martin was not in the same category, and they were not in the battling for positions and anything like that, or they're not. They were racing a different race.
Yes.
But Kevin then essentially just tried to do an overtake on a part of a track where there is no really room for an overtake.
And also where he went there was no room where he was.
And then usually in the Nürburgring is that if whenever the people then make room, they usually put on their indicators. It'd be like, oh, I'm gonna put on my indicators to indicate people, oh, you can go left or right or something like that, right? None of that the Aston Martin driver did. Kevin Estre then tried to put on a move where there was never a move on.
No.
He ended up crashing the Aston Martin. The Aston Martin flipped.
Yeah.
The driver had to go to the hospital. it just sounds really dramatic because obviously it is. I don't think there was like really any terrible injury, but I think it's just standard
Yeah.
protocol, which I agree with.
I mean, because so Kevin tried to go through the inside, where there was no space on the inside. So he hit the Aston, like you said. The Aston went across the track into the wall, into the steel barricade. That ended up flipping him, like you said. So he flipped over on to the roof, and then also again slid over the track, and there's not a lot of space.
No.
So even all the cars coming behind, there's a huge risk of them crashing into the driver and the car at that point. Luckily, nothing happened, although Kevin Estre just passed, and then the two other cars were really close behind. They were able to avoid him.
Hit him.
100%.
I'm surprised.
So-
Because it's, you're going at
Yeah.
over 100 kilometers an hour, maybe
Yeah.
200, who knows? And there's very little room.
Yes.
There's not a runoff area in
Yes.
that part of the track because it's part of the Nordschleife.
Yeah.
And also to point out that Aston Martin wasn't taking any unusual lines. He was
Yeah.
driving the racing line.
Yes.
So he wasn't doing any unpredictable moves where you're like, oh, why would you do that?
Yes, 100%.
It was nothing like that.
Yeah.
So then they ended up getting a 1:40 time penalty. Kevin Estre was called to the stewards to essentially give his side of the story.
Yes.
Um,
Which I'm like, I'd be so curious. what
yeah, I'm
he-
sure he's
I
going to be
mean-
like, blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
Then essentially they would have to serve the penalty, but the Porsche was like, we're not going to serve it. We're going to try to fight the penalty afterwards.
Yeah.
I think this is definitely a long shot. I understand from the team's perspective where you're like, listen, let's not do it now because then there's no chance of us coming
Yes.
to the front if we just finish in first.
Yeah. And they were leading by like 5 seconds.
Yes.
I think at that point. So it was not, it was going to be really hard to make up
Yes.
or to like drive. At first I was like, oh, maybe they're trying to drive out the 1 minute and something. But then I was like, oh, they're only 5 seconds ahead. So that's quite a feat, or you have to expect maybe the other people to make a major mistake or something like that. So which is of course a possibility. But yeah, so they didn't serve the penalty. They crossed the finish line in first place, and then they ended up not being first.
Yeah. I don't know if this also was a frustration from Kevin where he's like, I'm not going to lose 2 24-hour races in a row. I don't want to be hindered by this
Yeah.
guy and then someone else making overtake. But this was obviously a terrible mistake to make.
Yes.
A terrible judgment call. Obviously,
Yes.
not on purpose, but you ended up crashing someone, trying to ram your way through something that was just never on.
Yeah, and it's also like he could have had. I mean, I think they just sent him to the hospital just to get some checks. I hope the driver is okay. I don't know at this point what his or their status is. But like it could have gone so much worse. And like you could have waited like another turn or something like that.
Sorry, the TV just turned on. Give me 1 second. I saw the countdown that the PlayStation was going to go into rest mode. Sorry.
Party foul.
Body foul.
But essentially, like I think that it was just so high risk, and
The reward was not there because you didn't even make it.
no,
on the
and it also like
podium
you're
now,
putting
right?
somebody else at risk, and
Yeah.
you did,
Yeah.
and it could have ended so much worse.
Yeah.
I mean, there was another incident where 2 Porsches went head to head because one Porsche had turned and it was facing.
Well, he was hit
It was-
by a BMW.
That is
so
true.
he ended up spinning,
Uh-huh.
and then it's like a hair needle
Uh-huh.
corner. So you have to make a sharp left, and then the other Porsche was coming around the corner. There's no way he was going to see the other guy, and there's no way that the team would have been able to notify him because this probably happened within like 3 seconds.
And it also looked like the sun, the way it was standing,
Yeah.
there was like this glare.
But yeah, he
So-
couldn't avoid him because
No.
the way he was positioned on track.
Yeah.
And then so there was a head-on collision. Fortunately, because it was such a low-speed corner.
Yes, exactly. I was just
both
going to say that.
drivers were uninjured,
Yes.
but both cars were out of the race then.
Of course. But then, like, so imagine if the Aston Martin, that was not a slow speed area where that had happened. So I'm just glad that the other driver seems to be okay. But I'm like, Kevin, so
Yeah.
unnecessary. And See, you didn't win again.
No, you didn't win again. I will say it was really awesome to hear that over 200,000 people attended the 24-hour Nürburgring race. Obviously, the weather was really good. It was hot, probably, but there was no rain. But it's really great to see how many people are attending that.
Yes.
I'm hoping, I don't know what the plan is for next year. I'm hoping maybe they could plan it a little bit better and maybe not do it back to back with Le Mans.
Oh, yeah.
Because it is just, as a viewer, a little bit exhausting.
Yeah,
because I'm very interested in actually watching it next year.
Yes.
But I don't want to not watch Le Mans, you know?
No, of course. But then there's also like, I hope there's a way to stream it or to watch it where you don't have to watch just one.
Well,
car,
I should have maybe then looked up if a stream would have maybe been through ADAC or something like that.
That
I'm
is
uncertain.
True. ADAC, you mean?
ADAC, yeah. So I do have two more things I wanted to talk to you about.